Hello, everyone. Welcome to the latest episode of the Nordic Football Podcast. I'm Steve Witt, and I'm with Jonathan Faduba as ever. We're heading into the international break. Crucial time of the season. Just about half a dozen games left in Allsvenskan and Eliteserien. Things are hotting up. Jonathan, my man, how's things there for you today?
Mr. Meatman Soccer, how are you doing? Hello to listeners. Hope you're well. I'm doing great, thank you. And I'm looking forward to this show. We've had a bonus episode last week, didn't we? So we are back now with some juicy content. And we haven't got, like you said, there's only half a dozen games. There's only 4 or 5 games left in Allsvenskan. But in Norway, there's a few more games than there is in Sweden. And I'm looking forward to discussing them with you. How are you, my friend?
Yeah, I'm doing all right. I've been pretty busy recently. I know you have as well. You've been you got some new studies on the go. I did hear, Jonathan. I saw a couple of tweets of yours a week or two ago, and what was I going to say? That was it. I've worked it out today. This is our 163rd episode of the Nordic Football Podcast. So, I mean, we've missed the 150, but we only do serious milestones here, don't we? So. I just want to say to all the listeners who've been with us right from the off, some of you, thank you for your support. And, of course, it's been a pleasure doing it with you, my friend.
Yeah, and I don't even know if that includes bonus episodes. I mean, if you include the bonus shows, probably might be pushing 200. But, it's a good innings. Like you said, you're a cricket man, you appreciate a good double century. So no need to celebrate 150. But yeah,
I wish, mate. I'd take 50 right now in my cricketing season. That's how bad it was. 163 not out is a very good innings indeed. So we're pushing towards that 175 mark now, which I don't think we'll do this season, but probably the start of next. We're in there. 200 even. Maybe this time next year we could be knocking on the 200 door.
Let's get to 170 first. It's like runs, mate, one by one. You know what I mean? Game by game.
Well, you'd be good. You'd be good in a cricket team. You know, I get ahead of myself too much. You sound like some of these experienced campaigners that will say that.
The Simeone way, game by game. Yeah. But yeah, we've got a lot to talk about this week. I mean, I think we're going to start in Norway. What we're right in saying. And yeah, just by the way, on that point, thanks a lot to the listeners as well for putting up with us for 163 episodes. That's a hell of a lot of words we probably spewed out of our mouths for over the 6-7 years we've been doing this now. I think 6 years. But yeah, listen, we've all got a lot to say when so much entertaining interactions happening. And I think, as you mentioned on Twitter this weekend, Steve, or is it X as we call it now? Things got very, very spicy indeed in Norway, and that's where we're going to start this week's show. Because Bodø Glimt are now top of the league. And that is probably the big key point here. We've got 6 games left, 24 played. And there was a massive game at the top of the table, Steve. I mean, there was big games everywhere, actually. I'm looking at your itinerary and almost don't know where to begin. Even OBOS, which we'll talk about in coming up. Even the league below has had a lot of excitement. We've had European games last week.
Probably the big story. OBOS is probably the big story this week, actually.
All right, well, what I'll do is we've got about 10 talking points for Eliteserien. I'm going to let you choose your first one.
Well, I think there's only one. By the way, I was just thinking about X and Twitter there. I wonder when I will start calling it X first and foremost, because for me, it's always going to be Twitter. Yeah. But it's mad, isn't it?
It's stupid.
I don't ever refer to it as X, but one day I probably will.
Can you imagine if Coca-Cola just woke up one morning we're calling ourselves Z? like this. Listen, I'm not one to question a billionaire, but as in terms of brand, I mean, I'm doing a lot of studying at the moment. Corporate strategy and branding, mate, is one thing I'm looking at. And why would you you've just thrown away massive brand equity just to call it a letter? But anyway,
yeah. One place to start.
Don't listen to us for our social media analysis, or maybe you do. Yeah, X or Twitter, whatever you. I'm with you. I haven't actually updated the app yet, so as far as I'm concerned, it's still the little ball.
I think my app automatically updated.
Oh, really? Yeah.
So I was forced to change it. But
what are your
I'll
thoughts,
tell you what, the Bodø Glimt X
Cool.
account certainly was happy on Sunday. They beat Molde 3-1 away from home at the Arca Stadion, and I've got to be honest, I didn't see this coming. I thought this match was going to go the other way. I thought Molde would get the 3 points. Bodø didn't have Pellegrino. He was suspended. That's a massive loss. The biggest, 22 goals he scored this season. He's still the best player in the Eliteserien, really. So I thought Molde would get a result here. And I think I tweeted before the games, if Molde, Brann, and Tromsø all won on Sunday, we would have 5 points separating the top 5. And I anticipated that would happen, but that, of course, football is never won, is it? As easy as that on paper. And Bodø Glimt came here and did a really good job. The other story of this game, Jonathan, there was an incredible 3 penalties missed in this game. So those who actually backed over 4.5 goals can be pretty damn annoyed, can't they? So crazy game, but Bodø Glimt did play very well. There was a bit of controversy here. VAR didn't go down very well again. Molde manager Erling Moe criticised it after the game. And but ultimately, Bodø Glimt, massive win for them, and that could be pivotal in the title race. It really could.
Yeah, goals from Saltnes, smashed one into the roof of the net. Grodem with a beautiful header, actually. Breivik own goal, and then Gulliksen for Glimt. As you mentioned, they were missing the influential Pellegrino. They played in a sort of 4-3-1-2 formation, Steve, I'm looking at the moment. Was that to sort of alleviate Pellegrino's absence, or how did they manage without him? Did they do anything tactically different compared to what they normally do? Because this was a massive game, as you rightly mentioned. Was there any sort of surprise changes in that lineup? Obviously, we saw Grumbach and Mombagna up front. Gulliksen played as a 10, I think. Was there any big changes lineup-wise or tactic-wise that mitigated Pellegrino's loss that you felt was key to the match?
I thought they were a bit more direct, actually. One thing Pellegrino doesn't really have is pace. He's not slow, but he's not rapid. And I think they managed to use their more athletic players in this game. And they could, I think they only had like 52% possession, which is quite low for Bodø Glimt. And they were definitely a lot more direct. Mombagna was a physical monster all game. Gulliksen is starting to develop his game. There was a real athleticism about the whole 11, really. And I think that suited them. So it's been a while since Bodø Glimt beat Molde. Molde have had the wood on them in the last few years, really. And that's another reason why I expected that it would be a home win. But it's a huge 3 points. And, that it's not the last time both teams are meeting. They will be the final game of the season in the Norwegian domestic season will be the Norwegian Cup final in December in Oslo. And that will be Molde Bodø Glimt. And that's going to be a mouth-watering prospect.
Yeah, I mean, the Breivik goal was really scrappy, horrible goal, really. But the third goal for Gulliksen is an absolute masterpiece. I mean, it's from front to back.
Yeah.
Cut them open like a knife through butter. Absolutely brilliant. Are Bodø Glimt back? I mean, this is, we've been talking a lot in recent weeks about the pretenders, haven't we, to this crown? We've talked about Viking. We've been talking about Molde, even you said as a sort of outsider. I remember you mentioning Brann at one point. We've done a Wirescout blog on Tromsø. If you haven't read that yet, go and check it out on the Huddle blog, Wirescout at Wirescout on Twitter. Is it Bodø Glimt's title now? Are they back? Was this the announcement of them returning to their perch? If you know what I mean.
I think everyone this time of the year, everyone does their calculations. They look at the remaining fixtures, in relegation battles, in title battles, and you say, right, they're going to win that, they're going to draw that, etc. I don't think too many would have said Bodø Glimt win this game. I think all the other contenders up there were looking at this and thinking, do you know what Molde can do as a favour here? And so this is a big surprise. And this is the sort of result which does feel pivotal. Now, because of their goal difference, they can afford to lose a game of football now. They don't have, they've got 6 games left and 5 wins is going to be enough, Jonathan. Simple as that. Well, even if Viking go 100%, I mean, there's no guarantee of that. They've started to drop points recently as well now. But it's certainly in their hands. They've got one. I looked at nothing's won on paper. The hardest game by far is Brann away. But they can afford to lose a game of football, like I say now. So I think that they have to be classed as the favourite from this point onwards. And Viking have just got to do all they can. Brann are not dead, but they're 7 adrift. Yeah, that result, that unexpected 3 points at Molde, I think, we might look back on that. And this funny enough, a couple of years ago when they last won this crown, they had a result at Molde and around the similar time of season, and that propelled them towards the championship. And I think it's very much deja vu again.
Deja vu again. That's one of those grammatical things that you're taught not to do in school, I'm afraid. Deja vu already means again, but I will let you off that editorial lecture. That's the editor of me speaking. It does tend to come out every now and then. Sorry, but yeah, looking at their next fixtures, Glimt have got 3 home games. Steve, they got Sandefjord, Besiktas, and then Lillestrøm. Quite a nice little run of games there. Any Manchester United fans won't really want to be talking about Turkish teams right now, given last week's Champions League result. But they're well set to sort of maybe the games after that, Stabaek away and then Besiktas away again. So it's quite 5 big games coming up. They've lost in Europe to Leverkusen, and also to I'm thinking of something different. But they've lost in Europe to Club Brugge. Sorry. Do you feel that? I suppose the question I'm trying to ask is, Pellegrino had to actually double take his goals this season, 22 goals. I thought that was combined almost. It's actually 31 combined, 22 goals, 9 assists, incredible. So to play without him is really impressive. Do you think now, from here, you've just mentioned how you think it will maybe play out, but do you think they've still got a chance in Europe? And what would be considered a successful season for Glimt?
Successful season definitely would be winning the league, obviously. And, they could double that up by winning the Norwegian Cup. I think if you look at the Conference League, it's going to be tough for them to get out of this group now because the likes of Besiktas are in. Turkish football is on the rise. It's been poor for several years, but it is on the rise again. Club Brugge, I think, are the best Belgian side, and they're in the Conference League. And that was an interesting game because it saw the return of Hugo Vettelsson and Philip Zinkernagel, actually. And then Lugano, I think Lugano have had a win in that group as well. So I just wonder if now they're going to focus on the domestic league and just say, let's win the league. If you win the league, you're back in the Champions League qualifying for next season. And, I think they're actually quite enjoying the games adding up because they've been involved in Norwegian Cup as well. Some teams, it's weird, tend to play better when they're actually just racking through the fixtures. I don't know what it is. We use this word momentum, don't we? And maybe that's something. They've managed the players well. Maybe that suspension was a good timing for Pellegrino. He could put his feet up, and he's refreshed now. So, they're relishing this role. It reminds me an awful lot of 2021 when it was very similar. And I kept saying that I'm not sure whether they can keep it up, whether they can keep juggling domestic in Europe. Well, they have managed to. I've actually been against them a lot recently in the betting. I didn't think it's capable that they keep it up, but they have. They've been like a relentless machine. Certainly not without faults, but once again, it looks like the crucial time. It's all about timing, isn't it? Winning leagues is about timing. You make your move at the right moment. That's what Man City have done so well in recent years over in England. We've seen other examples across the world, and this just feels like a great bit of timing from them at the right moment to really put a dagger through the hearts of the pretenders.
Yeah, funnily enough, when you were saying that, Man City was running through my mind. Is that conditioning, isn't it? That kind of teams that have that know-how when it gets to the business end of the season, and maybe Glimt have developed that over this last sort of 5 years or so under Kjetil Knutsen. My final question on Glimt before we move on to other talking points. Faris Mbanya, Steve, I'd like you to just give a little bit of an overview of him because he's someone who we haven't talked about a huge amount on this show. He's doing very well in the goal scoring charts. He's I think he's third top goal scorer. Could be wrong on that, but he's he's having a fantastic season, Steve. Sorry, he's actually the fourth top goal scorer in the league with 13 goals. 23 years old, Cameroonian. Just tell us a little bit about this player, Steve. What's he brought different to Glimt maybe, and is he someone that should be on people's radar?
Yeah, I think incredibly, Akor Adams is still the second top scorer, even though he's been sunning it on the French Riviera for the last 2 or 3 months. Just shows you how good he was. Mbanya is, to be fair, it's been a good pickup. They got him from Kristiansund. I don't think a lot of people would have identified this player as someone who would come into and do a great job. But he's adapted really well. I think the best part of him is the physical aspect. He'll work hard. he's one of them sort of power horses who just certain days you don't want to get involved with that sort of player, do you? And I think it helps that he's in this team because he's often surrounded by a lot of good technical quality. But I feel like Glimt have got the balance right by having someone of his ilk in that position. A bit of he can bully people. Now, there's not too many others in their side that can bully in terms of physical, but he'll put himself about. And there's been some games this season where they've had to go to sort of plan B or plan C, and they've used him really well. I think I remember one fixture early in the season when they beat Lillestrøm away. He bagged a couple of goals in the air. He's a different sort of option for them. And it looks a tremendous signing. 13 goals. He's probably going to add to that, isn't he, before the end of the season? He might end up with 16 or 17, which would be a fantastic return for a player that just arrived on the scene this year.
Great stuff. And just finally, before we move on, on Molde, Steve, where do they go from here? Are you worried about them? Is this signs of concern, or do you think this is just a bit of a blip?
Well, the manager, Erling at the end of the game, said that the best team won. He held his hands up. He wasn't happy with VAR in this game. And the whole of Norway is not happy with VAR. I think they'd try and ditch this system if they could. Just waiting around, taking too long, certain decisions which are just too vague, lack of consistency. So he was moaning about that. And where does it leave Molde? I mean, they just faced Bayer Leverkusen in Europe, and I think that was a tough game. Leverkusen are a really good side this year, and it took a lot out of them. They were competitive. They're just still paying Jonathan for that bad start where I think they lost like 5 of the first 6, something daft like that. And they've got the good thing for Molde, if they finish 4th, they will be in Europe next season, whatever, because they're in the Norwegian Cup final. Even if they lost that final, they would still be in Europe because Glimt would win it. They can finish 5th and qualify for Europe by winning the Norwegian Cup. So I think now their focus is going to probably try and finish 3rd in the Europa League group and win the Norwegian Cup, and I guess finish, top 4, medal. But yeah, I think it's one of those years where they've played well, very well in patches. That was the first time they'd lost in about 13 or 14 games. But it's just that start to the season which let them down. And look, Glimt were kind of like this, when Molde took over last year. It's hard. It's a good little ding-dong they've got going between them, these sides, at the moment in recent times. And I think some other teams now want to get in on the mixer as well. It's hard to stay consistently dominant in a Scandinavian league. And I think Sweden's been the same, hasn't it, in the last few years as well, really.
Yeah, your preseason tip to win the league has sort of let you down. I mean, that's 11 points now. They're pretty much out of it. One more win for Glimt, and Molde will be officially out of the title running. I think I'm wrong. 2 more wins, 3 more wins.
Well, they're 11. They're not going to win the league.
They're pretty much out of it. But
yeah, they can still get in the medal spots that they need. They're going to need to win all the last 6 games, which they can do. It's Molde. They've still got a very good. I've said on some recent betting shows that I've done that Molde have arguably been playing the best football in Norway in the last few weeks, which is probably true. But it was, a letdown performance against Glimt. They didn't perform as they're capable of doing. And if you're not on it against Bodø Glimt, you get punished. Simple as that.
Simple as that. In terms of Molde, they are 2nd in the league actually for XG. Glimt are miles ahead with 60.05 XG according to our partners Y-Scout. Molde 51.59 XG. Lillestrøm actually 3rd in the league for XG, 50.03 with 41 scored. But as you say, it's points that count at the end of the day. One thing I've actually noticed, Steve, with Molde, their top goal scorer is miles below the top goal scorers in the league. It's actually way below. It's 15 goals below Pellegrino and 8 below.
Berisha hasn't worked out. Berisha didn't work out.
Eko Adams, as you mentioned, been in France for half the season, and Molde's got top goal scorer. Ola Brynhildsen on 7 is 12th in the league, joint 12th.
He's transferred out. I think he ended up in Belgium or somewhere. They have lacked a scorer. Very good point, actually. You look at it, crunch the numbers. They've got good XGs and all that, but they haven't converted the chances this season as strong. And it comes down to the fact that they haven't really been having a reliable starting striker. Like Berisha, say, hasn't worked out. They've had Wolf Eikram in that false nine quite a lot. He's had a fairly good season, Wolf Eikram, to be fair. But I'm sure top of their sort of shopping list for the winter will be to make sure they get a focal, reliable number 9 who's going to took those chances away.
Great stuff. Let's move on. Viking. Not a great weekend for them. Obviously, we've talked about them in recent weeks. Are they potential contenders? We had a lot of listener questions about them. A lot of interest in Viking this year from listeners. But they've dropped points against Odd in a 1-1 draw, Steve, that was played on Saturday. Just tell us a little bit about that game and where that leaves Viking now.
I'm really reluctant to criticise them because they've had such a good season. If you had said to any Viking fan, they'd be second place, 52 points with 6 games to go, they'd have been in dream world. I mean, they won something like 10, 11 in a row. And, they've had a brilliant year. They've only dropped points in the last 5. But, that 4-0 loss at Molde was a big, big blow on October the 1st. I don't think we've talked about that yet, have we, on our main show? I think we talked about it on the bonus show. 4-0, that's just... That is a poor result, and they followed it with a 1-1 draw against Odd. And I was a bit disappointed with Viking here. I think they didn't take the bull by the horns. I think they were sort of last 20 minutes. They were wondering, should we stick or should we twist? And I think that they were thinking, is 1 point okay here? They were probably thinking along the lines of myself that Bodø Glimt would lose against Molde, or certainly not win. And, just say Glimt had lost, they both would have been on 52 points then. Yes, the goal difference is big, but, I think they didn't take it. They really needed to take a few more risks in that game. They didn't do it. I've seen teams before that don't know whether to stick or twist, Jonathan. Inevitably, it's the teams that have the extra bollocks about them do end up winning titles, don't they, and stuff like that. But I don't want to criticise Viking because they've had a fantastic year and they certainly could still win this league. They're the closest challengers. They've got a decent fixture list. If you look at the remaining fixtures, it's not bad. Would not shock me if they certainly won 5 or 6 out of the 6 games. So it's all to play for, and they've had a fantastic year.
Yeah, and it can't be too harsh on Viking. They've been really good. They're probably the most influential player, I'm sure you'd agree, is Zlatko Tripic. He's registered the most joint most through passes in the league, 45, according to Wisecout, and the most key passes in the league. Seems to be very influential along with Pellegrino in those sort of creativity numbers. Are they also maybe lacking, apart from Tripic, like a top goal scorer, or are they, where would you say that their flaw might be in this team, or is it just a case of they've overachieved by miles?
I think the flaw, and I said it a few weeks ago, is always going to be in their heads, the mental side of it. They're not used to being involved in a title race, whereas Bodø Glimt are certainly been involved a lot recently. Molde have, to an extent, Brann, because they've been winning leagues. I know it was the end of the OBOS, but they're used to winning. They're used to being a winning machine. Viking, it's a little bit different, and I think, like I say, they've just been undone by a couple of games where they conceded a late goal against Vålerenga. Molde kind of showed them, they're not at the level perhaps of the top 2. I mean, the best 2 sides are still Bodø Glimt and Molde. It doesn't show it in the league table, but they are the best 2 sides. And then that Odd game, like I say, I think it's just they're in uncertain waters. How do we do it? This is a bit of composure. Do we go all out for the win? Do we take the point? Against a mid-table side away from home, I think they needed to do a little bit more. But in terms of flaws, they've had a good, solid season across the whole of midfield, defence. Squad depth probably is something you could say. They have had a couple of players ruled out recently for suspension and injury. Maybe that's what's cost them a little bit. But overall, I mean, if they finish second, it's still a great year for them. But I just look at it and I'm like, if they don't win the league, this might be the one chance they get in like 5 or 6 years or 10 years to take the gold medal. And it's you just don't want them to have any regrets, do you, at the end of it? But they're certainly not dead yet, Jonathan. And is there more twists and turns to come? I don't know, but
11th last season, and in fairness, Steve, we've still got more games to go in Norway and Sweden. I got confused with my math there because I was thinking of Sweden, which has 4 games to go. But if we look at Viking's remaining games, you could argue, they've got a massive game this weekend against, well, not this week, after the international break, sorry, against Tromsø. That's a big one. After that, Steve, they've got Godset away, Hamkam away, Sarpsborg at home, Aalesund away, Rosenborg at home. With the greatest respect to Tom Dent, who might be listening as well, it's a tough run, but you could have worse running, couldn't you? They could potentially.
You could have worse.
If you're a man who likes to forecast matches, if you're forecasting those last 6, what are you looking at in terms of maybe a points bracket that they could aim for? Because that could be the difference between Europe, maybe even sneaking a title challenge, still sustaining it, or finishing outside the European places. Maybe, what would you forecast those final 6 games?
I think it's likely they win 5 of them, right? There's no reason why they can't win all 6, but probably something might go wrong in a game. I'm looking at that Sarpsborg match. Sarpsborg are the sort of team who can just upset anyone on the day. And even, just say it did go to the last game of the season, Viking, Rosenborg. Rosenborg are always the sort of side who are up for it as well. But Viking Tromsø is a big one. I like the fixtures. I think they could be a lot worse. They should be winning plenty of those games. And, I think Bodø Glimt are not going to have this title handed to them on a plate. Bodø Glimt are going to have to go out and win it. So, Viking, all they can do is just win as many games as they can, right? Simple as that. But it'd be interesting to me. Glimt, you'd imagine, will beat Sandefjord at home on the Saturday going out after the international break. The last game of the round is Viking Tromsø. They're probably going to be 6 points behind Glimt. That's when the pressure really comes on. That's when you sort of see which teams are there for the long haul. And that game is going to really interest me because Tromsø, will be a big underdog in that match, and that's when they tend to relish it. So that's a huge game for Viking. If they drop more points in that, then I think it might be, it could be the title gone.
Yeah, and this is you mentioned they could win all 6. For those who might have raised an eyebrow there, this is a team that won 11 straight. So they've certainly shown this season they've got in the league anyway. They've certainly shown they've got an ability to put a consistent run of form together. Let's see how they get on. Rosenborg, we'll talk about them in a minute, but let's move on. We'll speed it up a little bit, Steve, because we've dwelled on these 3 teams. Tromsø, do you want to have a brief mention of their loss against Aalesund?
It's a huge shock. Aalesund had lost every single away game before this fixture. 11 out of 11 away losses. They're effectively down, nothing to play for. Well, not nothing to play for, but it looks like they're doomed. And I can't believe this happened. It was a deserved win though for Aalesund. If you look at the metrics of the game, they turned up. They scored a late winner. Tromsø did go for it as they had to, but that's not good enough, is it? If you want to get medals or even challenge for the title, then you've got to be beating Aalesund at home. If they'd won that game, they'd only be 4 points behind Bodø Glimt, and still in the one behind Viking, and then they've got to play them next. So I think that was a real disappointment for Tromsø's supporters. A shock result, and I never saw this coming at all. To be fair, Tromsø recently they've been playing a lot better and been deserving a lot of their points. So I never saw this coming in a million years, Jonathan. Well done to Aalesund, I must say that. They're still obviously showing some fight, unlike say Varberg in Sweden, going down with a whimper. Aalesund at least giving it a go, but massive disappointment for Tromsø, and that might cost them a medal. That result
might cost them a medal. Big loss. If you haven't checked out the Wisecap blog, I would recommend it. It's great work from Meat Man Soccer there. And in that match, goals from Erlene, and then Carl's back and Hammer for Aalesund were the ones who got the winners.
Hammer blow.
Bit of a There you go. That might even be the episode title. Who knows? But let's move on. It's not on the itinerary, but I can't let you get away without mentioning this one. So I'm going to actually pull rank here on the itinerary, and I'm going to ask you about Sarpsborg 5, Rosenborg 2. And this featured not only a demolition for the team who like to call themselves the Bayern Munich, or we've titled them anyways, the Bayern Munich of Norway, getting smashed, walloped 5-2. But as well as this, Steve, I'm just looking at the goal scorers here, and I just see a name that's quite familiar to me from back in the day. I think he played in Sweden, and I think if I remember rightly, I'm trying to remember now. Yeah, you weren't such a big fan of him, were you, Stephen? His name is Joe Inge Berget, who I believe I remember. For any long-term listeners of those 163 episodes, I think you would have heard at least 4 of them, Meat Man Soccer, taking this player apart when he was at Malmö. A hat-trick, Steve. And a little birdie tells me, to make matters worse, he was in one point in your fantasy team before you unclicked the button. So what has gone on in this match? I mean, on a serious note, that is. I mean, Rosenborg are just a mess at the moment, aren't they?
Well, it's a disgrace, isn't it? I mean, the reason that I looked at Joe Inge Berget in fantasy is because I've said all season, really, Sarpsborg are just crying out for a poacher sort of finisher. They've not had a reliable goal scorer in the last 2 or 3 years enough. And, maybe they found their man in Joe Inge Berget, who is an experienced campaigner. I've always had a problem with him in terms of his composure, especially when he's sort of cutting in from the left-hand side. But his position in this team seems a lot more less mobile. And they just need him to be there to use his sort of nous and poach home easy winners. I mean, I just think that's the type of player they've been after. But, this is, from Rosenborg's perspective, that's nowhere near good enough. Before the game, it just kind of showed where they are as a club, that Sarpsborg are a heavy odds-on favourite to beat them. But Rosenborg are in 9th place. They're not safe yet, I mean, you look at the table. I mean, they won't go down, but they're not safe. This is, their fans must be absolutely, this is just a nightmare campaign. A lot more was expected of them. And, Sarpsborg are starting to find some form. They're the sort of team, they can beat anyone on their day. The Sarpsborg, I think, they're so gung-ho, they're wild. And this was one of their famous wins, really, for them. And Joe Inge Berget just recently joined the club. And if they can feed him easy positions, then he's going to cash in.
Yeah, Fredrikstad, to be fair to him, arguably scored the goal of the game for Rosenborg. It was a brilliant strike. Top corner on his left foot. There's been a few 5-2s, hasn't there? Ham Cam took a 5-2 beating as well. Sorry, Tom, to mention that. But yeah, in the round before, losing 5-2 at Stabaek. So there's been back-to-back 5-2s in 2 game weeks, I think. I'm right in saying. Although that was a kind of the schedule's a bit weird, isn't it, at the moment? It's all like...
Yeah, the previous round was sort of... Everyone's now, I think, played the same amount of games. But, hat-trick, there was a couple of penalties, I think, in that game as well. Lundqvist got a couple of goals for Sarpsborg. He's had a good season. He's a player that's caught my eye. And, if they're... it's just a shame for them that they're not closer to the medal spot, because they're finishing the season. It feels like they're playing really well. Playing some good football, Sarpsborg. And, there's 2 or 3 teams that are finishing strong. Brann, I've got to mention before. Probably in the next episode we'll talk more about them, especially if they do beat Molde next. But I think they've won 6 in a row, and they're in 3rd place, and they're still sort of in the title race, if you know what I mean. But they're playing some really good football at the moment. Sarpsborg have definitely caught my eye as well. Yeah,
and Berget's goals, they're just kind of poachers' goals, aren't they? As you've mentioned, kind of smart goals. Fair play to me. Still got that wonderful beard. I think that he's kind of put one up on you there, Steve.
He's better in that. No, he's better in that role. We think about it, right? The place like New York City and Malmö, they sometimes had him coming on the left-hand side, and I just think then he makes the wrong decisions. So I think credit to the manager here. He's put him in a spot just to be a poacher, and there's a know-how in terms of positioning for that, and. There was an art, isn't there, to poaching. It's not as easy as you think, actually. Otherwise, we'd all do it, wouldn't we? But I've just got a feeling this role in this team suits Joe Inge Berget really well.
I mean, we won't talk too much about Rosenborg. They got the defending for the hat-tricks. Berget's hat-trick goal, the defending's a disgrace. Like, it's just how are you getting counter-attacked at 4-2 down? I mean, what is going on? But it's a lovely little dink from Berget, and fair play to me, He's had a good career. He won the league with Malmö in the Ondal Thomason season of 2 years back. A player who, like you said, he played out wide, and he lacks pace. You know, he's in his 30s. He never really had pace in the first place. But like you say, if he's intelligently utilised, and he wasn't bad in that Malmö team.
No, I know. I've never thought he's been terrible.
I'm not saying you are, but I'm just commenting. In terms of positioning, he reminds me a little bit of the way Malmö utilise Soren Rieks at the moment. Actually, it's quite similar to that. Like kind of someone who just gets in the box and plays in those wide areas in those pockets at times. Doesn't have pace. He's not like a star player, but he weighs in the goals every now and then. Malmö seem to do that with an experienced player every now and then. But let's move on. Great result for them. And Rosenborg, their season of woe continues, as you said, not even safe yet. But I think we've already had one episode titled that they're going to go down. So, life of Stabaek, 2 straight wins. Let's look at the relegation battle, because we do want to talk about OBOS before we wrap up part 1. Steve, between 10th and 15th, it is getting tight, isn't it? It's starting to really. It's quite unpredictable.
It is, and even Aalesund, are they dead yet? You know, if they're beating Tromsø away, maybe they're sort of in that free hit territory where, I mean, I can't see them staying up, but they've still got a chip in a chair after that result. Sandefjord, now you worry for them. They've lost against some key rivals, Vålerenga and HamKam at the weekend. I think that's a bad result for them. I thought they would beat HamKam. HamKam had just suffered a bad defeat against Stabaek in the midweek match, played the entire second half with 10 men. And I thought they were probably in a great spot there, Sandefjord. And if they had won that game, they'd have been outside the drop zone. They're on 21 points. Stabaek have had back-to-back wins under Bob Bradley. I said on the last main episode that he could get something going there. Don't underestimate Bob Bradley. He's a really strong motivational coach. And, to beat HamKam at home 5-2, that's just got the wheels in motion. And then a 1-0 win against their big rivals, Lillestrøm. And to keep a clean sheet in that game, fair play to Stabaek. Haugesund just don't go away, do they, either, Jonathan? They just, you think they're in trouble. And another team that rolled the dice with a manager change. And, they've had a big win there. And, obviously the 3 points for HamKam was massive as well. Suddenly Vålerenga might look vulnerable. What did I say? 5 points between 10th to 15th. It's all to play for, my friend. It's all to play for with 6 games to go. You're probably going to ask a prediction from me soon, so I'll have to have a think about that. But it's quite exciting down the bottom for the neutral. Yeah,
don't give you a prediction yet. But I just want to comment on the form table, because you just mentioned that there. I mean, for those who are wondering, actually, if you look at the last 6 games in Eliteserien, the form guide, unbelievably, Steve, Rosenborg are actually bottom of the form guide, 4 points from their last 6. Godset and Sandefjord are joint with them, but Rosenborg -7 goal difference, 15 conceded in 6 games, unbelievable. But yeah, you've mentioned a few teams there who are sort of starting to climb out of it. I mean, Sarpsborg were actually 3rd in the form guide, but Brand is still top of the form guide, 6 out of 6 wins according to this. Soccerstats.com, I don't know if that's correct, but yeah, HamKam 7th in the league as well in terms of the form guide. So yeah, the table's kind of like, there's a few teams who are sort of climbing out of those lower positions. Steve, is there any team that you would say you feel will definitely stay up based on how they perform? You've got to look at sort of Stabaek in the relegation playoff at the moment. Let me just read. I'll read the bottom 5. I'll read from 10th to 15th. I'll read the league positions. We've got Aalesund, bottom of the league, 15 points, 24 games played. Sandefjord, 21 points, so they're 6 points ahead with 24 games played as well. In 15th, those two occupied relegation spots. 23 points, Stabaek, 2 more points than Sandefjord in the relegation playoff. Then you've got 24 points, Haugesund, 24 play. Everyone's played 24, by the way. Haugesund in 13th. Vålerenga, 24 points, played 12th place with -8 goal difference. HamKam, 27 points, 4 points clear of the relegation playoff in 11th. And then Godset, 27 points as well, but -6 goal difference in 10th place. And I'll just throw in Rosenborg in there as well. Only 6 points clear of the relegation playoff with 29 points. Is there any of those teams that you would say right now, Steve, with 6 games to go, you think they'll be fine? Is there like 2 teams you'd pick and say, no matter where they're on the table right now, could be bottom, could be anywhere in those positions, that you'd say they're fine?
Yeah, the 2 teams I'm going to say are HamKam and Vålerenga. And the reason is that HamKam, I think they are mentally very strong. And I never had them. Pretty sure I didn't have them in my preseason predictions in the bottom 3, or certainly not to go directly down. And they've dealt with a lot of adversity this season. They had that shocking run. I think they lost 8 out of 9 games. They were conceding goals left, right, and centre, but they bounced back well. And I've seen, I follow Tom Dent on Twitter, Instagram, and they've got a good social team. And I just like their gist. Whenever they have a bad result, they just own it. There's no excuses that come in, and they've proven time and time again that they can come back with that strong mental resolve and bounce back. And also, we know HamKam will always take a draw if they need to, and that isn't something that some of these other teams are willing to do. I don't think. Like they grind out. They had a good draw against Sarpsborg recently. They managed to get a draw against Bodø Glimt out of nowhere. They're the sort of team who will, and they're on 27 points now as well, by the way. So it's not going to take an awful lot more to get them surviving. So yeah, I'd say HamKam. I think they've got enough. Vålerenga, because I just think Gerbacker has done a really good job here since he's come in. They've lost 2 of the last 3, but who they've lost against? Bodø Glimt and Brann. I don't think we're going to hold that against him too much. There's a massive game next round. Lillestrøm Vålerenga, the big derby of Oslo, probably the biggest game in the whole country now in terms of feistiness and edge. He's going to need like an armed guard, I think, there. That match could go absolutely crazy. Lillestrøm Vålerenga.
When's that game?
It's the next round, the next match. And it's one game I wish I was there to be. I wish I was going to that because I think it's going to get really spicy. But, you wouldn't. I don't think Vålerenga fear anyone. Vålerenga, you've got a good team. They've had some good signings, and I think they're capable of getting results against any team. So, push come to shove, I don't see them in the bottom 3, John.
Excellent stuff. And 2 teams that you think you're worried about.
I'll tell you one team I'm worried about.
Out of those bottom 6, 7.
A team I'm starting to get worried about is Strømsgodset. I think if you look at their form, they've been treaded. I just think they've been a little bit beach bound in recent times. Probably felt like they had enough points on the board, but look at their run. I think it's like 9 losses out of 12. It's not a good set of fixtures for Godset. They're suddenly struggling away from home again, which they always have done in the last 5-6 years. And I'm just a little bit concerned by them. They've got their fixtures remaining are not too bad, but I'm not particularly liking what I'm seeing on the field. They've got 27 points, but probably should be. They should be all right. They're probably just one more win or so away from securing the safety. But I think that was a big result for them to lose against Hargus, and I still think Aalesund will go down. The second automatic spot could be anyone still, because I'm not ruling out Sandefjord. They're the sort of team that can get a random result out of nowhere. So the second spot could be anyone really. But gun to my head now, because that was such a crippling defeat against HamKam, I would have to say Sandefjord.
So there you go. And we've got one listener question to wrap up part 1. I know that you want to talk a little bit about a couple of teams in OBOS, but let's look at the question from... I would describe this listener as sort of having a good season, let's say. I'd say, a bit like maybe Odegaard in his first year in the Prem, or, maybe not quite Haaland, but someone like that who comes into the league and makes an instant impact. Had a big impact this season with many really intelligent questions and a lot of interaction. And it's Big Sig, at Big Sig 5. He even earned a follow from us, I think, at one point. He says, for someone who didn't follow the OBOS as much as I would have liked, as of right now, what can we expect to see from Fredrikstad next season? Also, Tromsø lost their last 2 games and dropped from the top 3. Will they drop further, or can they reclaim a medals position? We've talked a little bit about Tromsø there. We've also got another really sort of, I would say, loyal follower of this podcast, Alex, at P2P_Alex on Twitter. How do Fredrikstad compare to Brann, and will they survive back in the top flight? Now, this is a big story. Steve, you were all over it on social media at the weekend. You actually tweeted something about a month ago, I think, on social media, which kind of went viral, which mini viral, I'd say, but for sort of second division of Norway, it's about as viral as it can get, I would imagine. It did really well about Fredrikstad and how well they were doing. Just tell us the story there, what's going on, for those who maybe missed that episode and maybe missed those tweets.
Yeah, Fredrikstad FK are back in the Eliteserien. They have been promoted after, I can't remember who they beat, but they won 3-0 and Kongsvinger lost. So they're back, first time since 2012. I mean, historically massive club. I think there's a lot of history here to them. They're one of the oldest clubs in Norway. They've got a fiercely loyal fan base, quite a lot of supporters as well. They've got a big stadium, one of the biggest club stadiums in the country, and they've been gone too long. Really, they belong at this level. I've always had a bit of a soft spot for the Fredrikstad. I've got to be honest with you. There's danger of bias coming into me next season on the Nordic Football Podcast because I do quite like them. There's something about this club. Fallen giant territory as well, sort of come back. But they've smoked the league. And I've always said the Fredrikstad job is one of the toughest in Norway because the expectations are always so high and it never quite works out. But they've brought in a Faroese manager, Mikael Thomason. What is about these Faroe managers that have been doing quite well recently, Jonathan? There's got something about them. Mikael Thomason won the league at KI in the past. And he's come in at the start of this year and he's only lost one match. Lost one match so far. They've won it on defense, really. Tremendous defensive record. The whole league's been weird this year, but it's been much lower scoring. I can't quite work out why. It's been a poor betting year for me, actually, in OBOS, especially in the last couple of months. The goals have not been flowing, Jonathan. Now, is that a sign of a good league or a bad league? I don't know. Historically, some used to say when the goals dry up in a league, the quality gets better, if you know what I mean. So, but yeah, what can we expect from them is quite an organised system, a 3-5-2 sort of system. I think they're going to be defensively stout. We're going to definitely see players from like the likes of Iceland, Faroes, Denmark. You know, it's not going to necessarily be predominantly Norwegian-based sort of players in this team. And but we're going to expect the noise. You know, it's going to be a passionate fan base. We're going to see the derby match against Sarpsborg, which is not a match that hasn't been played very often in the last decade. But it's a really feisty game, and not a lot of people would think that match could get really feisty, but they absolutely hate each other. So I'm looking forward to that fixture. And they've done it. Well done, Fredrikstad. I always knew they'd come back one day. And, congrats. Big congrats.
Big congrats to Fredrikstad. Yeah, I mean, you've explained there pretty well. I was going to ask you why should anyone care? But you've explained it pretty well there. Sleeping giant territory, maybe a sort of a football manager save type scenario.
I did have them on it. I did actually have them.
Yeah,
I did a bit of twitch. I did Fredrikstad as a save because they went down as low as the third tier, Jonathan. That's how far they went down. But they've done really well. And just a quick mention before we do finish up for half time here. K from Oslo. Things are looking very good for them too. They've got a 7-point gap. It'd be a nice story. They've been knocking on the door for so long to come up. They're always losing the playoffs. They lost their manager, Jürgen Isnes, to Stroms Godse, who felt that he couldn't take them any further. And it's fantastic that the assistants come in there, K from Oslo, and they're looking good for that second spot. Another team, the reason they've been doing well is the defense. So the two teams that are in the top two spots at the minute, they're really stingy at the back. That's been serving them well. So if the KFM do go up, it would be a fantastic story as well.
And finally, just to wrap it up, we're in stoppage time here, Steve. So please keep us to less than a minute. Mjøndalen and Jerv, you've got them on the itinerary struggling. We had Kevin Nicol on last season. What's been happening at Mjøndalen and Jerv? Is there any particular reason for the struggles, or what's your talking point there?
My talking point is, in Superettan, where we've seen sides go down from Allsvenskan and they often go down again. But in Norway, this doesn't happen very often. Like, if you go down, you're usually straight back up quickly, or you're at least in the top half. I mean, Mjøndalen and Jerv were Eliteserien clubs not long ago. Jerv last season were in Eliteserien, weren't they? Yeah, they were, weren't they? They could be they're in danger of going down. So I think there's signs this season that the OBOS is getting stronger, because you usually come down and you dominate teams quite easily. None of the teams that have gone down this season, Kristiansund are in the playoffs. They might come back up. But I tell you what, I think the OBOS is getting stronger. Lower goal numbers usually do mean that a league is improving rather than crazy scores. And, maybe it's not now. Teams now in Eliteserien like Aalesund have always been yo-yo. Are they guaranteed to come straight back again now? I'm not sure. Suddenly, relegation might mean an awful lot more going forwards.
Fantastic stuff. We'll wrap it up there for part one. And if you are bored in this international break, I will tweet this as well. But if you're bored in this international break, this half of the pod will take you through in exactly one half of football plus stoppage time, if there is 5 minutes added. So that should get you through, I don't know, Luxembourg against
Iceland are playing Luxembourg.
So, but we won't.
Northern Ireland,
otherwise we're going to be into half time. So tune in for part 2. We're going to talk about Allsvenskan, maybe a little bit of fantasy as well. There's a lot to talk about. Title race getting spicy. Get your cup of tea. We'll be back.
Welcome back to the Nordic Football Podcast. The first half is in the bag. You ready for the second period? Hopefully it doesn't maybe go on quite for so long and we don't have as much stoppage time as the original half. But with Jonathan Faduba, and we're here to talk about Allsvenskan matters because it's got spicy again in Sweden. Jonathan, just 4 games left and there's been plenty of drama.
Yeah, and I don't know if Steve will include this on at the end of the show or in the blooper section, but he did refer to us as the Nordic Football Codpiece a minute ago in a botched intro, which we might replay at some point. But yeah, I don't think we are a codpiece yet. I think we're a podcast still. Things are getting real in Sweden. It's 4 games left now. For those of you who subscribe on Patreon, just want to say patreon.com/Nordic Football Podcast. Thanks so much for your support as always. Sort of been up and down with content on Patreon. But we had a bonus show last week where we went in detail on some of the teams and some of the big games, which if you missed that, then you would have missed 2 weeks basically worth of kind of Allsvenskan talk. And we talked about some key matches in the title race there. So those of you who do subscribe, I hope you enjoyed it. It was a video show. Those of you who missed out, then you can listen now to the last 4 games because we've just had, we're now sort of nearly through the season now. It's really getting to crunch time, and this could be the most important round of the season so far, Steve, because pivotal games at the top of the table. Elfsborg, Malmö, and Häcken, all in different situations. And it's Elfsborg who have taken control of this title race with 4 matches to go. Malmö dropping points with a last-minute C1 scrab winner for Kalmar. I know one particular listener will be extremely happy with that result, maybe 2 of it, Pedersen. But you know who we're talking about here. And stunned Malmö basically, and that, you know, that's probably upended the title race in terms of everyone thought Malmö were going to take control of this title race really and sort of steamroller and just go on and win the league from here. But the script has been flipped, and Elfsborg are the ones who went to Brommapojkarna and got a 3-0 win. Took them some time. I have to say, Steve, I watched the first half of this game, and about half time I started thinking to myself, maybe Elfsborg aren't cut out for this. That was actually what I was thinking at half time. I was thinking, you know, Brommapojkarna, they weren't really creating much. They were sort of, it's one of those games, and this is why I think it's quite pivotal. It's one of those games where you've seen it in Premier League sometimes, where maybe a team's in contention with 5-6 games to go, maybe like Arsenal. You know, last season there's a good parallel maybe where you're like, then they're suddenly at West Ham away, or I don't know, Southampton at home, and you're thinking maybe these lot aren't cut out to actually win it. But I was thinking too soon because 3 goals in the second half, and their fans were going crazy down in Stockholm at Brommapojkarna Stadium. Elfsborg fans dancing around, made it look comfortable in the end. Really encouraging thing is that some of the new signings got on the score sheet as well. So I think that's something that was really important for Elfsborg. And obviously then Häcken dropped points as well at Hammarby. So the title race really has started to sort of, it's not done yet, but it's really started to take shape now. We know who are the main contenders. You might want to read out the table.
Well, I'm going to read out the table in a minute. I'm going to read out the results of the previous round. I've noticed recently there's not been a lot of goals in Allsvenskan, Jonathan. Both teams to score no in 15 of the last 24 fixtures. I don't know what that's all about. Usually goals accelerate this time of the year. But there's been a hell of a lot of clean sheets, which is strange. Anyway, Brommapojkarna 0, Elfsborg 3. Hammarby 2, Häcken 2. Kalmar 1, Malmö 0. Varberg 0, Djurgården 1. Värnamo 2. Norrköping 1. AIK 1. Mjällby 0. Halmstad Degerfors and a 0-0 draw. And IFK Göteborg 0. Sirius 1. serious. We'll talk about them a bit later, perhaps. But they've been on an absolute tear, haven't they, since Jonathan dug into them a little bit. And in terms of Elfsborg, now they are top of the table on 57 points. All the teams have played 26 games. Malmö on 55. Both teams have a goal difference of plus 30. Häcken 51 points with a goal difference of 27. It looks like the race is run, in my opinion, John. I don't know about you, but the 6 adrift now looks a lot. But in terms of Elfsborg, you mentioned them against Brommapojkarna. I watched them against the 1-0 win they had against Halmstad a few weeks ago. They didn't deserve the win, but they found a way to get the result somehow at the end. They only beat Varberg 2-1, which is, I mean, really, that's not good enough, is it, against Varberg? But again, they got the win. They're finding ways to get results, JF, and that's a resilience that is quite telling, I might say. Do you get that? But I mean, how impressed are you with the mental side of their game? They're not necessarily playing that well, are they? But they're doing enough to get the result.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure. I'm not sure, Steve, if the big story here is Elfsborg's sort of grinding out these wins, or if the big story is actually Malmö and Häcken throwing away this title, because Häcken's form, if you look at the form table for this season, second half of the season, Steve, it's unbelievable actually, because top of the league, and I know one particular listener, Brazilian in origin, I believe, Luis de Almeida, will enjoy this very much. Top of the form table for the second half of the season is Varberg. And Häcken are nowhere near it. They're actually mid-table. And Malmö are kind of, I think, third or fourth. So, is the story here Elfsborg sort of winning this league, or is the story actually Malmö and Häcken have botched it? Now, listen, there's still a long way to go. 4 games, those 4 games for Elfsborg are going to be really tight, and you know what it's like, Steve, for incumbents, teams who haven't had success for sort of 5 to 10 years minimum. Elfsborg's last title win was more than a decade ago, I believe. Each game starts to get more and more nervous. The pressure cranks up, and on 1 or 2 occasions this season, they have folded under that pressure. And they've got similar parallels to Häcken. They've had to sort of even similar parallels to Malmö. They've had to rebalance the team. They've lost players, and I really feel like this title race has been the story of who can adapt quickest to the summer, because Häcken have basically lost their whole forward line. Traore and Sadiq gone. They've had to integrate Launi. Obviously, Chilufya now, who's started to come into some form. He's got 3 goals in his last 2 games. Obviously, Hristic as well, who they signed. A couple of others who they signed as well. Elfsborg have had to deal with the loss of Andrejka earlier in the season, and of course, a couple of others, Roma, and they've brought in a few players. I think Hedlund was on the score sheet this weekend. You'll correct me if I'm wrong. And yes. And then Malmö, they've had to deal with obviously the loss of arguably the best young player in the league for the last 10 years, Hugo Larsson, who's now actually playing in Bundesliga. He's seen him starting games. Still a teenager, I believe, and they've had to rejig the midfield. They've just brought in Oliver Berg, who started to maybe find a little bit of form. So it's really been a case of who's been able to manage that transition quickest. And if you'd asked me before this weekend, I would have thought Malmö would have won this game. They started to pick up a little bit of momentum. Berger started to look really good, but he's gone back to his former club, and they've really flopped. Obviously, Rydström as well gone back to his former club, and he's been humbled by Henrik Jensen at Kalmar. So I wouldn't sort of like start writing Elfsborg's title piece yet, if that makes sense. I don't want to sort of get too ahead of the praise. I think they've got a long way to go, and I think everyone at Elfsborg probably feel the same way. I think that within the club, I think they're going to be a bit like me earlier, Stephen, with my sort of partido a partido, which means game by game, pod by pod kind of thing, Simeone vibes. And so I think that's how they're going to approach it, really. I don't think Elfsborg will get carried away. Tellin's quite a mature manager, it seems. So, but one thing I would say though, Steve, is there are moments in the season when you do feel that maybe a psychological barrier has been overcome, and I actually feel that's what happened at Brommapojkarna a little bit. Yeah. Just because of the way they celebrated, the fans were going mad. Like at the end, they were dancing with their fans, and so I think maybe the last month or so, there's been a lot of pressure on Elfsborg, and I felt like they kind of let off that steam at the end of this game. So where they go from here, is that going to galvanise them? they've got an international break now, so they've got to sit there for 2 weeks. Is that going to bring nerves? Seeing themselves at the top with, you can almost taste it, Steve. You know what I mean? 4 games to go with an international break. It's like you don't want it to stop right now, do you? You don't want 2 weeks to think right now. That's the last thing you want. So this could be a badly timed international break for Elfsborg. But at the end of the day, Steve, they've got more points than any other team in the league. It is in their hands. They win all 4 games. They're champions of Sweden.
Well, 3 wins and then a draw against Malmö, that's enough as well. So it certainly is in their hands. I've got to look at both teams have got 3 of their 4 games are tough. They both looks like they've got an easy one. Elfsborg have got Degerfors at home, second last game, and then Varberg at home next week. That Malmö will easily beat them. But on to Malmö now, because I'll be honest with you, I did not expect this to be the situation we were in at the start of the season. I think I actually said in the pre-season pod, didn't I? I expected Malmö to win the league by 10 points. After the start they had, I think they won, was it 6 or 7 in a row? I think we all thought it was going to be done fairly quickly. But they've dropped a hell of a lot of points. The most recent being a 1-0 loss against Kalmar. And unsurprisingly, there was a question that came in, or a comment from Varson, Oscar Hult, 1991 on Twitter. Give him a follow. He's a good lad. And he said he's looking forward to hear us talking about the title slayers Kalmar FF, considering the games they have left. Do you think Kalmar could get 4th? But more on that in a minute. But I've seen some tweets from you about this game during it, and you were saying that Malmö was struggling to break them down. Kalmar can be a resilient side. It looked like 0-0, and then Simon Skrab came up late with a winner deep into stoppage time. I mean, what did Malmö do wrong in this game, or what didn't they do good enough? Because it sounds like it was a flat performance. Credit Kalmar as well. How have they managed to shut them out and get a 1-0 win?
Yeah, great question. It's a game that I think I commented at halftime, I think on Twitter, that Malmö were really struggling to break them down. And I think the biggest talking point in this match was actually Henrik Rydström's post-match comments. Tactically, Kalmar sort of played their usual style. They tend to play a sort of 4-3-3, 4-2-3-1, depending on the situation. At times, a 4-4-2 maybe. But they played that 4-3-3. They actually had XG 0.72 according to Wyscout versus Malmö's 1.17. 2 shots on target to Malmö's 2 shots on target. Malmö had 8 shots, Kalmar 5 in total. And Malmö had 56% possession. But at the end of the day, Steve, that's all irrelevant if you're not creating the chances, which Malmö didn't. Both teams created an equal amount of sort of shots on target, even though Malmö's XG was slightly better. But Rydström's comments post-match were very interesting and maybe hint at a team that is a little bit losing its way. I'm very dissatisfied with my decisions, he said at the end of the game to Discovery Plus. He took off Kiese Tellin, Steve. Now, that was a big sort of... Kiese Tellin's had a bit of an up and down season, really. He's still one of the top goal scorers in the league, if you actually look at the statistics. I mentioned about Norway top scorers and that kind of thing. You might be able to pull up the list. But he is still kind of up there, but he's not... He's been hit and miss, very hit and miss. And I know anyone who plays Allsvenskan fantasy, he's very expensive to own, and I think a lot of people have sort of swerved him. But Rydström said, Kiese Tellin had 2 good situations and was close to scoring. I decided to bring Vecchia to play more like a 9 and Taha Ali so that they could run in behind. It turned out that we were looking for a foothold, and then Kalmar defended very well, he said. So he said, I blame myself. That's the bottom line of his comments. And so he's not happy. Vecchia came out and said he doesn't have much to say. He wasn't very happy himself. He went up as a 9, but wasn't in the game basically when he got moved to switch positions. And of course, Rydström losing at his former club, the club that he left. So for Kalmar, this is a really sweet victory. Any Kalmar fan will be loving this because Malmö famously took their manager at the end of last season, and it was a little bit of bad blood in the way it was dealt with. I remember when this happened, there were sort of accusations about Rydström, maybe giving Kalmar his word and then turning around and sort of disappearing like a thief in the night type thing. So Kalmar fans really celebrated. I mean, it was a 96th minute winner, but you're going to celebrate one like that anyway, no matter what happens. But they really went mad about this win. So, I think they're probably very happy to beat Malmö. But he said, Rydström, it will sting a little bit tonight. I won't sleep much. I felt it would be worth enough, but now we got what we deserved. So, yeah, none of the three teams are looking convincing, I have to say, Steve, at the moment. It's really kind of like I'm expecting Malmö to win this league. They were my preseason team. I still think they'll win the league. But if they won the league from here, I'm still waiting for them to sort of like pull out 4 games where they win sort of four in a row and sort of announce themselves as champions. They're sort of limping over the line. And I think as of now, I wouldn't call them deserving champions. So I'm not an Arsene Wenger type who comes out at the end of the season and says, we finished second, but we were the best team. Whoever wins the league is the best team, in my opinion. But I don't think they currently have done enough for me to say they're deserved champions. I remember the season with Yondal Thomason where a lot of people said, they didn't really deserve it. But I didn't believe that at all. I felt like they were deserving champions. There were games where they showed they were champions. I've not felt that this season so far. So I'm kind of wanting, if Malmö are going to win the title, I want them to show it in the next 4 matches. I don't want them to just limp over the line. And, Häcken, really, that's another story, really. They've just run out. Häcken have just run out of steam. They're still in it, but they're another team that no one's really shown they deserve the title at the moment. So I really hope that the last 4 games, I want to see someone just take the scruff of the league by the scruff of the neck and
I know what you mean.
I don't want to see
by the horns.
Yeah, I don't want just someone to win it by default because everyone sort of wins 1 game each or something. I'd like to see someone really take the scruff of the neck, but I'm not seeing it from Malmö at the moment. The Berg, bringing in Oliver Berg looked like it was really working. They changed the tactics around a little bit, but then they get shock results like this. So yeah, it's really open and up in the air, Steve, at the moment. But Rydström was not happy.
Yes, it's really interesting. Of course, it's in their hands as well. If they win all their remaining games, they'll be champion. So, let's see. I mean, in the minute we're heading towards that final match showdown, Malmö against Elfsborg is the last game of the season. At this point in time, it would be favourite to the title would be on the line for that game. Let's hope it is in a way from a neutral perspective. Just a couple of things on points per game. In the last 13 league games, Malmö have only averaged 1.61 points per game. And over the course of a season, that would only get you 48 points, which is normally about 5th or 6th place. Isaac Kiese-Tellin started like a train this season. He scored 13 goals, but 8 of them were in the first 5 games. Since then, since the first 5 rounds, he has only scored goals in 3 different games. A couple of times there was a brace, but since round 5, he's only netted it in 3 other fixtures, which is remarkable. I don't know what's gone wrong there for Malmö. They won their first 8 games. They won 11 of the first 13. I mean, I suppose those might come back at you and say they are, if they do win the league, they're deserving champions because it's over the course of a whole campaign. And they were excellent in those first 13 rounds. But how's it gone? I just don't get where it's gone wrong. I thought they'd win it at a cancer, Jonathan. It feels like that Mjällby result, which is just Mjällby beat them and gave the rest of the league that blueprint how to frustrate them. It's all gone downhill a bit. It's like there's no plan B with Malmö.
They just haven't really got a balance, Steve. I think it's like I just sort of said, really. They haven't really, since they lost Hugo Larsson, in my opinion, they haven't really had a convincing structure. They've got all these great players. They've got Vecchia, who had a bad injury, of course. They've got Nanasi, one of the probably the best, arguably the best young talent in the league this year, pound for pound, considering quite a few of them have left. They've got, they've thrown Berg in, who was like Jurgen's main signing, basically, in the middle of the season. Busanella's had a fantastic year, but he's gone off the ball slightly of late. Pontus Jansson came in. He's been suspended, by the way, for swearing at officials in the post-match drug test. So he took a ban for that, and that's been quite a big storyline. Pontus Jansson getting himself into hot water. They've got a really good midfield. They've got Taha Ali, who's been one of the star men of the season. But it's just that balance, Steve. Like you said, the Kiese-Tellin thing embodies it all, really. He's won the league with Yondal Thomason. He scored a lot of goals. He sort of started flying out the blocks, and then it's just sort of stuttered. He's almost embodied their season, really. Kind of looked incredible at the beginning, and then they've just stuttered and sort of scraped their way, really. Elfsborg started to take control of the league. Malmö then kind of got back into it, like you said, the blueprint in terms of breaking teams down. I think at times Rydström's tactics are. Does he have a plan B? Is maybe a thing. I'm not entirely sure he's figured out a consistent plan B in terms of, he's very good at that possession-based style. He loves that. He's very good at implementing it. But has he actually got a plan B? And I guess that is the area that I might question them. So I think, listen, it's a bit harsh because every team they're all in contention at the moment. So it sounds like I'm being negative about all of the teams, but it's just that we probably don't have a kind of clear team, maybe like in Norway, where you've got teams who are sort of doing very well. I feel like the teams are limping a little bit.
I get it, because I think about it, John. At the start of the season, Malmö was so good. We're thinking we might have an absolutely exceptional team this year that wins the league with 70+ points and fair play. Then Elfsborg come along, have that brilliant run mid-season, and we're like, you know what? They are taking this bull by the horns, and they're going to zoom on and become this fantastic champion. And then they've stuttered. I see where you're coming from. It's like there's been a lot of fragilities, and then Häcken, I think, to be honest, they've just had their team decimated, really, haven't they, all summer? And it feels like they just conceded too many goals this season. But I mean, third place would still be not a bad position for them, I suppose, would it? Defending champions, and they come again next year. It looks like that. It does look like the bronze medal is very much around their necks right now.
Yeah, I mean, even if we just look at the Y-Scout stats and move on from this in a minute and move on to sort of like there's other big talking points, but top of the XG is Häcken. I still feel like on their day Häcken have been the best team in the league. I know that's maybe slightly biased. I mean, the fact that they've lost their main players is an issue, but Malmö are actually third in the league for XG, 47.12, Elfsborg 49.24, second, Häcken 56.82. So you can see even in the stats, and by the way, Sirius are fourth in the league for XG. So that explains my rant a little bit. Imagine if they were actually firing as much as they and sort of keeping them out of the other end as much as they could have. They could really be having a really good season. Wasson probably wants to hear a little bit of analysis about Kalmar. Kalmar actually bottom of the table for XG this season. I mentioned it when they sold Rajovic, who, by the way, he started the season really. He started his time at Watford really well. He got, I think, 3 goals in his first couple of games, 4 games. But that explains Kalmar's plight this season, and that's kind of why we haven't talked about them much. There's not been a huge amount to talk about. Lowest XG in the league, so you can see where their issues lie. But they've pulled one out with Scrab. It was a low XG chance, really. It was a good shot, but it wasn't a huge sort of. They didn't carve Malmö open, really. It was more of a decent effort and a punt late on, a brilliant strike. Where Malmö obviously have been the best team in the league is their defensive record. They've got 24.52 XG against. And that's where Häcken have really struggled. Häcken are actually 6th in the league for expected goals against. Their defense has just been too open. They don't keep clean sheets. They're very leaky, and they haven't been able to sort of maintain that. Normally, they'd beat teams like your 5-2s, like your Rosenborgs and that kind of thing that we talked about in part 1. Häcken would usually be that team that would destroy teams, and it wouldn't matter if they concede 2. Now, they concede 2, they're in trouble. You've seen against Värnamo, you've seen like in this game against Hammarby, for example, like they don't have that.
Well, the problem has been away from home. Last season they ground out the 1-0, the 2-0. They have not been able to keep clean sheets, have they? So
yeah, but last season they could go to. I remember blitzing AIK away from home. The last season they outplayed teams away from home easily, and they've lacked that this season. They don't have that kind of explosiveness on the break that they used to have. They haven't really integrated Lajoni Hrstic as well. Chilufya sort of maybe that might turn that around a little bit, but they've just lost that explosiveness. But Malmö's season's been built on that sort of good defense. Elfsborg have got the balance of both. They're second for both, so maybe on balance, Malmö have got the good defense, but not the greatest attack. Häcken have got the best attack, but the worst defense of the 3. Elfsborg are kind of in the middle, so maybe that's what's going to win them the league. But yeah, in terms of obviously ball possession, Malmö 61.5% according to Y-Scout. That Rydström style is clearly integrated, but it's just a simple case of the fact that they lack a bit of a plan B. And you know what, Berg is another funny one. Oliver Berg. I feel like he's another one where it's like his season's been a bit strange, really, hasn't it? It's a kind of is he a false 9 in that Malmö team? Is he a 10? Is he like where does he?
He drifts all over the place. Doesn't he? You watch him; he's everywhere.
but from a Malmö point of view, do you need to drop Kiese Tellin? Do you need to drop Taha Ali? Do you need to drop Nanat? Like you can't have a false 9 and a number 9 and then still have wingers and make them all work at the same way. Like there's a trade-off somewhere that I don't think he's figured out yet, and then we're running out of games. So yeah, I mean, you'll tell me the remaining fixtures, Elfsborg, Malmö, and Häcken, but it is very close.
Yeah, the remaining fixtures, obviously, the last game of the season is Malmö against Elfsborg, who Elfsborg, of course, beat them earlier in the season 3-0. That's what maybe started all this rot in the first place. And, before then, Malmö against Varberg at home. I think we can give Malmö the 3 points there, can't we? Elfsborg's next game is at home against IE Core. I think Malmö have still got to go to Häcken as well, second last game. So that's no gimme. Elfsborg are at home against Degerfors in a match, and I think they've got Gothenburg away in another one. So it certainly is all to play for. Just a word on Häcken, actually, Edward Chilufa, because we had a great sounding episode title, didn't we? If we'd managed to have time to do a main episode last week, talk us through that one, Jonathan. He has actually made an impact, hasn't he? He's looked all right since he's come in as Chile.
Yeah, we had a title. Maybe we'll save it for another time, so I won't give it away. But I do just want to say, obviously, Wasson asked the question, and I think we've got one or two other listener questions, Steve, so you may want to check.
Yes, can they get top 4? Can Kalmar get top 4 or not? Is it too late?
Too late, in my opinion. But I just want to give a shout out to Scrab, because I think he's had we haven't really talked much about Kalmar. I think Scrab's been phenomenal this season. I think along with Rajovic, probably been their best player. The defense has been not as good as I think it was under Rydström in terms of they're not as dynamic, but they are quite solid under Jensen. But I think Scrab's been the key man. Gojani's been all right when he had a good game against Malmö. But yeah, I think Scrab deserves a shout out. Moving on to Häcken. Yeah, they frustrate me. I mean, it's difficult with Europe, and this is there's a wider topic here, Steve, about when the league is positioned in both leagues. Does it benefit or disadvantage Scandinavian teams? And at the end of the day, I think it's a disadvantage because they lose their players. If Ibrahim Sadiq was still at Häcken, I think they'd probably win the league. But he's not, so they're not going to win the league, in my opinion. I feel like the time's running out for them. And this Hammarby game, they were 2-1 down. Obviously, they came back. Chilufya got his goal. He loves playing against the Stockholm teams, doesn't he? I think he's a Djurgården man through and through at the end of the day, because that's 3-2 against 2 Stockholm teams. And he did say that he would have preferred to go back to Djurgården. So, I don't know if he's trying to send a message to someone, but clearly he likes playing against those rivals. But yeah, they got a late equaliser, which could actually be a crucial point. On balance, we've still got 12 available. And like you said there, Steve, there's still games, where Häcken could actually, they could still win the league. But I just feel with them,
they need help.
They've got the best midfield in the league. They did have the best attack in the league, but I'm not sure they do anymore. And they don't have the best defense in the league. So on balance, I will admit a little bit of bias here. I would probably like to see them retain the title, just because I think they're such a compelling story, and I don't want that story to end. I feel like it's too early. I wouldn't like to see, for example, Hogmo leave. I'd like this Häcken adventure to continue, because I think they're the most entertaining Allsvenskan side I've seen, arguably since we've been doing this pod, in terms of just that explosiveness. And I actually miss that team already, because we had it for like a year basically. Traore, Sadiq, just the way they blew teams apart. Even Lars Olden Larsen, we've forgotten about him, haven't we? Basically, I mean, he left in the summer. They've lost their whole forward line basically. So it's kind of sad in a way. And I don't really want that story to end, but I feel like a chapter might be turning there, and you can see it in the turnover.
Could they go again though? I mean, are they the sort of side they could get third place, which is a very good position? Could they go again with a decent transfer window if they can keep the manager, which is obviously a big if, because he's a manager that's in demand? But maybe they could go again next season if things go well for them. It might just be, look at Bodø Glimt. Everyone says the one season wonder. Well, it turned out to be, they're still competitive now. They're still going for leagues again. So maybe if Häcken, they've got to play their cards right. They've got to make the right decisions. But it's still not the worst thing for them to finish in third.
It's not the worst thing, but I think from a legacy point of view, I don't know if this is bias talking or if this is rational, but I almost feel like Häcken almost and deserve. I'm a strong believer in the Wire quote. If anyone likes the Wire, the series by David Simon, there's a quote in the Wire: "Deserve ain't got nothing to do with it." And I'm a big believer in that. Like, deserve, no one deserves anything. They deserve doesn't mean anything in football. But I almost feel like they deserve to win 2 titles, if that makes sense. But like I said, that deserve ain't got nothing to do with it. At the end of the day, you win it or you don't win it. Like, so I feel like the mitigating circumstances are the fact that they've lost their entire forward line. You can't find a Benny Traore every week, Steve, or Ibrahim Sadiq. And also it's just some of the games. That Aberdeen game is arguably my best game I've watched this season. I'm thinking of the Djurgården game that I was at in Gothenburg. Like, there's a lot of Häcken moments that I've enjoyed. I probably enjoyed them more than any team in the last sort of 18 months, watching them in terms of games I can remember. Whereas some of the teams are a bit more conservative, a little bit more kind of like they're not quite as aggressive going forward, a bit more kind of defense-minded. Kalmar were a very good team as well last season, for example. If you're thinking of teams that you remember and you say, yeah, that was a great team, that Kalmar team was very good as an example. But they've lost their forward line, Steve. And then we haven't talked about Europe yet. They've lost against Karabag, obviously at home. They lost 4-0 by Leverkusen. And with these 4 games remaining, it's all well and good saying they're still in the title race. But if you look at the running, Steve, they've got Molde away coming up, which is massive, by the way, for this podcast. And then on the Thursday, and then they've got to go to Mjällby like 3 days later. That's a tough game. If they get through that, then they've got Malmö at home, which is essentially must-win game at this stage of the season now. And then they've got the Häcken-Molde game, the rematch of that at home. And then 3 days later, last game of the season, away to Brommapojkarna. So it's a really intense schedule in terms of like trying to, do 2 things at once and win the league. 6-point gap. I think they can beat Malmö at home, but I feel like I think they're up against it a little bit. So I feel like if you were to ask me who's going to win the league, I think I'd still go with Malmö as of now. But I think at the end of the day, Steve, I want someone to deserve it. So I'd like to see. And by the way, just to finish off this section, Elfsborg Malmö is going to be a massive match, isn't it? I mean, if we can get to the end of the season with that playoff, that will be some game.
That will be a big game. So, yeah, all to play for with 4 matches left in the Allsvenskan title race. At the bottom of the table, got a couple of questions here. And I feel like this might just be, a final swan song for a certain side who we don't really talk about that much down the years. But Varberg boys, we may never mention them again. They may never come back again. But they are officially relegated. Someone actually asked a question. I need to remind myself if this was actually, that was it. Jack Häcken, Feyenoord enthusiast, who we cannot give his @name on X, unfortunately. Are Varberg boys the favourite club of Stephen? Not if someone calls me by my full name, but I'll answer that in a minute. And then Jonathan Woodgate.
You've got in trouble, Stephen.
That's the missus. The missus calls me Stephen sometimes if I'm in the bad books. But Jonathan Woodgate has asked a question as well. So not Carl Woodgate. Sorry, where have I got Jonathan Woodgate from? Carl Woodgate. Carl underscore.
Focus, Stephen. Focus.
With Varberg basically down, who else is going down? With Degerfors having to play Varberg, yet is there life in them? We've answered the title race question, but Varberg boys are officially relegated, and no, they are not my favourite team in Sweden. In fact, I actually commented after he tweeted that they were relegated good, and I tell you why good. Nothing against Varberg, it's just I've not enjoyed watching them play the last 2 or 3 years, Jonathan. I just haven't, and I just feel like they need a reset and it's a relegation that might do them some good, but they have been terrible this year. It's officially over now. Their misery is complete. Thoughts?
Yeah, I think I don't want to be too harsh on Varberg. I mean, I think they've been in Allsvenskan for the last 4 years, promoted in 2019, and they to be fair to them, I think they have added a little bit of flavour. But I think they've just run out of steam. I said it at the start of the season. I said in the preseason. I put them bottom in the preseason preview. and I didn't even need to really do any analysis. Normally, I go through every single team in real detail, but I took one look at that 45-man squad, Steve, and I was like, they're gone. I couldn't see any identity. I think preseason results were poor. The manager, I mean, I don't want to think what's inside someone's head, Steve, but sometimes, have you ever heard of this phrase, quiet quitting? Where you quit your job, but you haven't actually quit yet. You just sacked it. Yeah. Quiet quitting.
He left, didn't he? Didn't he leave
it's an industry term, quiet quitting. And I almost feel like at the start of the season, he'd quiet quit. I almost feel like he'd already sacked it in. He went to Hobro, of course. He went to Denmark. But I almost feel like the club, someone in that club took their eye off the ball, because they had a big squad ever since they joined Allsvenskan. It was always a nightmare trying to analyze them, because they got so many players. But this season it just felt ridiculous. I mean, talk about Chelsea, Steve. This is like, if Chelsea need 2 dressing rooms to fit their players, Varberg need 4. What on earth? How does the whole squad park at the training ground in the morning? I bet they had arguments about the parking, let alone trying to think about tactics. 44 players. Just absolutely ridiculous, let alone the payroll. I mean, either they're all on peanuts, or the club's running some serious overheads, or there's something going on. All factors put together, I was just like, they're gone. They haven't got the hope. And they started sort of okay, but there were some games where, I mean, the serious 7-0 was like watching, like if me and you, right, and Big Sig, and let's say Wasson and some of the other like Nordic Pod sort of alumni, our biggest supporters, all got together and played an 11-side match, and we said, right, we're going to play Sirius away. I think that we would have looked exactly how the Varberg players looked at 4-0 down. Like that look of just like, why did we do this? You know what I mean? In front of a crowd. Like let's just say me, you, and 9 other listeners of this podcast got together and we're like, we're going to go and play Sirius away in front of a crowd. At 4-0, Steve, I would have looked at you. At 4-0 down in the first half, I would have looked at you and we would have had the same look as Varberg players, like, why did we do this? And they're a professional football club. They looked like they had their brains had left their bodies at 4-0. It was like, we're finished. We're absolutely done. And they've been gone for weeks, if we're being honest, really. Offered very little, shown signs at times. Obviously, I've ranted about them on occasion, but just lack quality, Stephen. And it's not only that they lack quality, they lack focus. So I feel like it's petered out, really. Will they be missed? They're not really. I think they had the underdog thing at the beginning when they were promoted. They're quite close to Gothenburg. They've got really got quite a nice sort of rustic stadium. It does feel quite nice going there and watching it. I think it's a decent stadium, and the story of the club was very compelling. But I almost feel like the story just kind of petered out. It was like there's other small clubs like Varnamo who are a bit more compelling now. Who are actually modern. And
there's other underdog stories, isn't there?
Yeah, like they're not even the best underdogs in the league anymore, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So it's like, what are they really now? I think that's what they've lost. They haven't really got any kind of focus. I think relegation will be good for them. Get rid of 25 players at least. Start to get a more focused team, and see if they can see where they go. Some teams you see them go down back to back. Could I see Varberg going down back to back? Yeah, I could. If I'm being honest, I think the club lacks direction. So I hope we see them again. But they could be replaced by another V in Super Red. And Vasteras are currently doing really well. Former Victor Lindelof's former club, another V. So V for Vendetta. And, goodbye to Varberg. I think it's been coming.
I've got a ridiculous stat here. In the last 4 games, they have conceded 73 shots with 38 on target against them. They've actually done well to only lose by 1 goal in their last 3 games. They've actually been really lucky not to take a few more big beats. I could see someone really. I mean, Malmö, Varberg. I'm not that could be 10. I'm serious. I think they're going to take at least one big pasting before the end of the season, because they've been mailing it in for some time now, Varberg. So it's goodbye to them. The rest of the relegation battle, quickly before we finish the show. crippling defeat for Degerfors against Sirius. We've not talked about this yet, have we? On any of the on a main podcast, Sirius scoring 3 goals in injury time to beat Degerfors was a ridiculous match. Degerfors are in trouble. Brommapojkarna are in trouble, and Halmstad, as I pointed out several weeks ago, are only just clinging on down there as well. Thoughts? I mean, Sirius, nice story actually. They've come back. They've done what you wanted them to do, and they've converted the chances. They've took the bull by the horns. The match against Degerfors just feel like a pivotal result, not just for them, but perhaps Degerfors.
Yeah, if I just may, Steve, just go back to Varberg for 1 second. I just think the funniest quote I've probably ever seen, funniest quote of the season, I think, was Joachim Lindner after the match.
Don't tell me he wanted more players.
I mean, what's their goal difference, Steve? You might have it to hand. What is their goal difference?
It's minus 34.
Minus 34, right? They're taking a 7-0. They're miles lower at the bottom. Post-match, Joachim Lindner get their relegation confirmed, and he comes out and says, "It didn't come as a shock." That is the quote that just sums them up this season. It's like even in relegation, it's sort of like, yeah, we're not surprised. Like, you know what I mean? I mean, that quote just made me laugh so much. It's like talk about accepting your fate. It's like being hit by a bus and then, you're sort of like, as you die, you're just like, yeah, I'm not surprised, I'm dead, kind of thing. You know what I mean? But no. In terms of that, I actually think Degerfors have got a good chance of staying up.
Again, they always seem to rise at the end, don't they?
Honestly, I think Degerfors, I feel like they've almost clocked how to stay up, how to survive. It was a big defeat for EF because they're not. I mean, I think they are out of it, but they're not 100% out of it against Sirius, losing at home. Marcus Berg, obviously, we got the news that he's announced his retirement. He had a tearful reception. He was at the game with his wife and his kids, and he was in tears. Paka Lagermir as well, which had to retire early due to injuries. A bit of a really sad story there because he was a good young talent in his day. I think he's only 25, 26, and he's retired. But yeah, I think that I'm really worried about Brommapojkarna. In terms of form guide, they're one of the worst teams in the league as well. I think they're near the bottom. And I think that Halmstad, I'm a bit concerned about them. As I said about EF Koilsberg, they're only 3 points above the relegation playoff. So that's actually a massive defeat, I think, to Sirius at home. Because I think if they'd won that, they'd be pretty much done. Sirius, that's a massive win, back-to-back wins. We didn't even talk about it last week, Steve. That turnaround, I mean, that was absolutely incredible. If you missed it, we posted it on Twitter, the last-minute goal in that game. Sirius coming from 2-0 down in the 90th minute to win 3-2 against Degerfors at home in a relegation 6-pointer. 99th minute winner. 90 goals were scored in the 91st, 95th, and 99th minute. Incredible, and the finish was unbelievable by Silgrel in that match. And then they've obviously gone to EF Core and won 1-0. So fair play to Sirius. And this is what I was saying about them, Steve. They're a good side. And it was just the fact that they were falling asleep and losing concentration. We had a few tweets when they beat Degerfors saying they've obviously someone at Sirius is listening to the podcast because they've bucked up their ideas since my little rant about, I don't know, 6 or 7 weeks ago. But I think they're pretty much safe, and I think they deserve to stay up. Sirius. I think they do play, as I said, 4th best XG in the league. I think they play really nice football. Tashreeq Matthews has obviously listened to the pod as well because he's actually become really clinical in recent weeks as well, and influential and decisive. And so they're all fulfilling the promise that I said they have. If you were to ask me as of now, I think I'd put Brommapojkarna going down.
That's direct.
And I'd say Degerfors stay up through the playoff.
Yeah, I think Halmstad are lucky that they've just got enough points on the board there because they have been sinking like a train. EF Core do have some tough fixtures, but the last match, if they do need it, is Varberg away. And I think we can chalk them up for 3 points there.
Well, the thing is, you say that, but that is a trap game. That's a derby, Steve. So that would be like if imagine the story if Varberg on their last match in Allsvenskan take out their biggest rivals, because it's a bit like Fulham Chelsea, that game. You know, it means more probably to Fulham than it does Chelsea. It will mean more to Varberg than it will EFK, that match.
Right.
They'll see that as like, if they could take out EFK, that would be almost worth relegation probably for some of their fans. It's not quite a derby, but that would be like, that's one game that I think they'll be up for.
What I will say now, if EFK are going to get relegated directly, then Degerfors have got to pick up a minimum of 7 points from 4 games, and one of those games is against Elfsborg. But you're right, the playoff is very much in play. Imagine a playoff EFK against Utsikens from Super 8, and that would be ridiculous, wouldn't it? But you're probably looking at Brommapojkarna for the playoff with Degerfors, and again, I'm not sure Degerfors will get 7 points or even 6 really. That would drag Halmstad into it. So, but yeah, interesting predictions. Brommapojkarna, it's a shame, isn't it? I mean, they had a great first half of the season, but it's really hard, these teams that come up every year. I mean, Halmstad as well. It's a brutal league to come into, it seems, these days.
It is indeed. It's getting harder, and I think the quality's gone up a little bit. Brommapojkarna started so well this season, but they've just tailored off. I think we've got a really exciting title race and a relegation battle coming up.
So the final thing before we go, Marcus Berg's retirement, you did mention that. Just thoughts on him as a player. You've watched him for several years now in Allsvenskan. On his day, how good was he?
Oh, yeah. I mean, this is a guy who's won multiple caps for Sweden, national team. Been around the world basically playing football in different countries. He's been a brilliant player. Last season, he was, in my opinion, arguably the best striker in Allsvenskan, pound for pound. But at the end of the day, his body's just caught up with him. He's in his mid to late 30s now. And it was just obvious. I said it earlier in the season, Steve. I said I wouldn't be surprised if he retires at the end of the season. He's retired with 5 games to go, basically. His body just can't hack it anymore. He was already having to sort of not train, basically. He was basically playing games, Stephen, and sitting out for a week and just not training, and then just playing games again. And that's not sustainable. You know, you need to be training. And that's where, of course, problems were at the beginning of the season. They didn't have anyone else. He was too, like, with respect to him, his body was too old to be playing week in, week out. And that was a massive issue for EFK. They've now got like the likes of Macholi, Santos, Selmani. They've been able to sort of lighten the load and the burden on Berg. I think it was almost unfair on Berg, actually, the amount they were asking of him, really. It was a season too long. They should have replaced him in the summer and then had him maybe as an impact player. So that was a key to their problems, really. They were too reliant on someone whose body, through no fault of his own, a great professional. And you saw the ovation he got at the weekend that summed it up, and obviously he was in tears. It's an emotional time for him. But yeah, a really great servant to Swedish football. I'm sure he's going to have an interesting post-football playing career now, maybe in the board somewhere, or, a lot of players go into sort of different routes within football. So I'm sure we will see him again at some point somewhere. A bit like Tobias Hussein, former guest on the pod, you know what I mean? I'm sure he might be integrated into the EFK somehow. So yeah, great career.
He finishes his club career with 551 appearances, 280 goals, 83 assists, and also at national team level, 24 goals from 90 Swedish caps. He's been around the block, like you said, several big clubs in Europe, and it all started off at EFK back in the 05-06 season, and it finished at EFK. So, he's a man who bleeds that club, and we wish him all the best in his retirement. Maybe, I don't know, maybe we might even get him on the NFP one day, see what he makes of his career. But I reckon he'd be a good guest. But good luck to Marcus Berg.
Good luck to him, and that'll be all for this week. You can find us on Twitter/X at Nordic Footpod. You can find me at JF Football, at JFFUTBOL. You can find Stephen at Meatman Soccer when he's not taking the bins out. And yeah, thanks so much for listening. Obviously, a bit of a longer show, but you might have missed our dulcet tones for the last few weeks unless you're a subscriber on Patreon. You can find us there at patreon.com/Nordic Football Podcast. We will endeavour to have a weekend preview for next week's show after the international break. So until then, unless we surprise you somehow, that'll be it for probably the next 10 days. Hopefully this will get you through it. And if you play this half, you will get to the end of Moldova against Kosovo or I don't know, Belgium against the Faroe Islands, and this pod will take you through the international break nicely. So spare it wisely. There's about 3 international games to get through, so maybe one half of one and one half of another. But thanks, Steve, for your time. See you soon.
Cheers, John, and thanks everyone for listening. Take care, and we'll see you again after the international break. Goodbye.